Hi, I'm Dave. In Unit 3, we will talk about boundaries and choices. Why are boundaries important? We need to draw boundaries because these affect our future choices and there are consequences when they are crossed. We may not verbally describe everything about us to other people, but in our interactions with them, where we draw or not draw our boundaries speaks a lot about who we are. With boundaries, it becomes clear when someone is treating you in a way that you shouldn't be treated or trying to influence you negatively, and this causes you to take steps to protect yourself. Setting boundaries allows you to consider the choices that are available to you and the consequences that come with making that choice. For example, when it comes to your relationship with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, how far should you go physically? If boundaries are not drawn beforehand, you may end up doing something you'll regret later or face consequences you are not ready to handle yet. On the other hand, setting limits bring more freedom to choose instead of letting your peers, hormones, or even consequences make the choice for you. Now, this boundary may change as we develop trust, which also means we have different boundaries for different people. But if a boundary is breached, it evokes a sense of insecurity and leads us to react defensively. Similarly, we should be aware that we draw boundaries on the activities we engage in, and these boundaries are not meant to restrict us, but to protect us from potential harm. Boundaries then define who you are and who you are not, what you think, feel, and do, and it defines your preferences, what you'll accept and won't, and what you are and aren't responsible for, so that you remain in control and not your feelings, hormones, friends, or the situation. Now, some of you might think boundaries are so restrictive, but let me ask you this. How many of you would like freedom? The freedom to do what you want without rules. Just like this funnel, we can live in the wide end while we're young, have loose relationships and sexual partners, try smoking, drugs, or excessive drinking. But as we go along in life, we realize that some of the consequences of these actions actually start to limit our options. Like a one-night stand, for example, that leads to unplanned pregnancy, resulting to the young mother putting her dreams on hold. It's like being given a credit card and going on a shopping spree, only to incur debts that you end up paying for the rest of your life. Now, let's look at the narrow end of this funnel. If we establish boundaries over our relationships and activities by limiting ourselves now, it's like living in this narrow end of the funnel. But that actually gives us more and more freedom to pursue our dreams in the future and to enjoy healthy relationships. Boundaries then may appear restrictive, but it leads us to greater freedom. The freedom to know each other as friends and pursue our life goals. When it comes to boundaries and high-risk behaviors, it's very easy to go down the slippery slope if we don't have clearly defined boundaries. Some boundaries are clear, but some are kind of gray. How then do we set these boundaries? To answer this, we have to be aware why people engage in high-risk behaviors and what the facts are. Setting boundaries, after all, shouldn't be based on what feels right to us. Good boundaries are about making a conscious decision to do the right thing for yourself and other people based on facts and sticking to that decision regardless of what you feel. Lack of clear boundaries can lead to some serious consequences like regret, trouble, and physical and emotional harm. So before you say, "It's no big deal," it would be helpful to ask yourself these questions. The first question is, would I be doing the same thing if someone was watching? If someone you respect, like your parent or your teacher, was in the same room, will you still do it? If the answer is no, then you shouldn't be doing it. The second question is, could someone get hurt? There are things we think do not involve other people but can end up hurting them even if we don't intend it. And the third question is, what are the consequences? What are the possible results that your actions can lead to? And in case that happens, are you willing to accept it? And can you live with the consequences?
Hello, I'm Jean. Let's continue our discussion about boundaries. Boundaries are needed not only for high-risk behaviors, but also for relationships. Healthy relationships require clear emotional, psychological, and physical boundaries. That's true of all relationships, especially guy and girl relationships. So drawing physical boundaries includes exercising your right to say no when a person tries to dishonor or disrespect your body. Being in the fuzzy zone for too long brings about hurt, confusion, disappointment, resulting in an emotional roller coaster ride for one or both parties. When a guy and a girl becomes very close friends, the line between friendship and something more can get so thin that neither side can tell where the line is or when it has been crossed. At some point, one person could think that they're just very good friends, while the other thinks that they're already in a dating relationship. And that's when they enter the fuzzy zone. Have you been fuzzy zoned? Now you might be asking, Jean, how can I get out of the fuzzy zone? How can I control my emotions? Well, let me give you 3 tips. First tip, guard your expectations. Know what you can and cannot expect from different friends. If you have a very good friend or a best friend of the opposite sex, well, emotional boundaries are even more important. Tip number 2, beware of emotional attachment. It's great to know that you can share your personal problems with someone and know that he or she will listen to you. But beware or be careful of becoming emotionally over-dependent on each other. Tip number 3, identify emotional blackmails. Be careful with statements like, if you don't have lunch with me, I'll get so upset that I won't eat anymore. There's a difference between being real and honest with your friends about your feelings and manipulating their emotions just to get what you want. Let's look at the web of consequences. When someone commits premarital sex, he or she will have to face the following. Emotional consequences, feelings like fear, regret, worry, loss of self-esteem, and even desensitization. How about pregnancy? Will you go through an abortion? Are you ready to put your baby up for adoption? Or are you ready to raise a kid? Are you ready for parenthood? Lastly, sexually transmitted infections. There are a lot on the web, and most of them are life-threatening. So saying yes to premarital sex is very complicated. Every teenager is not yet ready for this kind of mess. It is an unnecessary pain. So after examining all the consequences, we are left with 4 choices. Choice number 1, are you going to passively sit on the fence? It means you're not going to do anything or decide on anything. Or number 2, will you go with the flow? It means you just let your life and relationship simply happen without a plan. Or number 3, will you choose to become or remain sexually active? Well, you've seen all the consequences behind it. Or number 4, are you going to be abstinent? Abstinence is refraining from sexual acts until you are in a committed married relationship. So we are here for you to examine and judge the consequences rather than live for the moment and suffer the consequences. We hope that you choose abstinence. Boundaries and choices. We have learned that boundaries are very important when it comes to high-risk behaviors and relationships. If we do not observe boundaries, we will surely face life-changing and even life-threatening consequences. So, the best choice is to enjoy the freedom abstinence brings.